It was neat to see at this Racket Sports conference, people talking about pickleball and how it's growing and how it's spreading, how everyone's playing it. The moderator was going out to show these coaches, many of them tennis, these different pickleball drills. I was really excited. I got my notepad ready. And one of the things I noticed, however, was that nearly every drill was a drill that I had seen before. These were drills that like 25 years ago, we were doing in tennis. These were presented as, in some way, that they were kind of new, but they weren't. What are some pickleball-specific things that don't apply in tennis or whatever other racket sport you're coming from that are just limited to pickleball? Not too long ago, I was at a racket sports conference, and this racket sports involved pickleball, but it wasn't exclusively pickleball. There were people who came from other racket sports as well. Tennis, for example, there were a lot of tennis coaches there, and paddle, or some people like to call it padel. And made sure I went to almost all the sessions, but I specifically made sure I went to all of the pickleball sessions. And that was cool. It was neat to see at this racket sports conference, people talking about pickleball and how it's growing and how it's spreading, how everyone's playing it. It was interesting to hear them talk about tactics or technique. I love that kind of stuff. I made sure that I was nice and early to go to the sessions that had to do with pickleball drills. Right? Pickleball drills. I like seeing new kinds of drills. I like to see what other coaches are doing out there when it comes to drills. And keep in mind, this was attended not just by pickleball coaches, but also by tennis coaches as well. I have been a tennis coach myself. 27 years ago or something is when I started teaching tennis. It's been a few years now since I've done that because it's pickleball all the time. But the point is, I've been around in tennis for a very long time. When the coach, the instructor, the moderator, let's say, was going out to show these coaches, again, many of them tennis, these different pickleball drills, I was really excited. I got my notepad ready. I was ready to make all these observations. Lots of people had their phones out. And one of the things I noticed, however, was that nearly every drill was a drill that I had seen before. And it wasn't just a drill I had seen before because I've seen a pickleball camp or I've even taught pickleball camp or whatever. These were drills that 25 years ago, we were doing in tennis. And what was interesting to me was that these were presented as, in some way, that they were kind of new, but they weren't. These were not new drills or new activities. And I felt sort of bad because the coaches that were sitting alongside watching, even though they weren't pickleball coaches, right? They might have been tennis coaches exclusively, but they too have seen these drills before. In fact, they've probably run most of these drills and activities before with their players. And it got me thinking. Afterwards, I was having a snack by the pool where this event was being held. And someone came up to me and he said, yeah, hey, how's it going? That's what you do at these events. You chat with other people that you don't know. And he said, yeah, I was sort of disappointed. I was really looking forward to some pickleball-specific drills. In fact, I came specifically for this session to get something new that wasn't tennis. But this was all just tennis stuff repurposed for pickleball. I said, yeah, I kind of noticed the same thing. And so it got me thinking a little bit more about what we as pickleball coaches need to do to start to introduce pickleball-specific activities for our players, whether we're running camps or clinics or private lessons or whatever. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that, crossover can make sense. So after all, pickleball and tennis are kind of like cousins. And so there are some activities that you could do on both courts with different equipment, different balls, no problem. But there's some unique ones as well. And as an example, like in tennis, you can just step in front of your partner and take a ball out of the air when they're being picked on, right? When they're being targeted, right? Because there is no non-volley zone in tennis. Well, you can't do that in pickleball. So to me, that's one area where we could explore, hey, what are some specific activities we can do when someone's being isolated, when someone's being targeted? How do we resist that? As I thought more about this, I also thought about other kinds of crossovers. As pickleball is becoming its own sport, not just something that's kind of like tennis. And there's also important similarities and differences between tennis, let's say, and pickleball when it comes to technique, right? How players swing the paddle has a lot of similarity when you do it well in pickleball, when you do it well in tennis. Is it always the same? Exactly. No, it's not. Other differences include the grips that you use. In tennis, good tennis players typically always use a continental grip. That's like you're holding a racket or paddle, like you're holding a hammer. The V of your hand goes right on top. That's how you play volleys in tennis typically. But in pickleball, you can play volleys like that. But when you watch most good volleyers, that's not what they do. Instead, they put their hands slightly behind the handle, right? It's called an Eastern forehand grip. And that way it makes the paddle face go straight up and down, and it's easier to brush up the back of the ball and create topspin. So that's an important difference. In tennis, when we volley, we typically are standing sideways, moving into the ball. We call that a neutral stance, or sometimes people call it a closed stance. It doesn't really matter. In pickleball, typically the volleys are hit with an open stance, right? Both your feet are facing toward the net. Your body's open to the net, to the court. Again, because if you're standing sideways and you're moving forward, you're likely going to be in the non-volley zone, right? Which you can't do. So anyway, this is a bit of an encouragement. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on this in the future about the similarities and differences. We made a really cool series of instructional videos for tennis coaches who are now starting to teach pickleball. You can find that on Selkirk TV and other places that you like to watch videos. But maybe we'll do another podcast on this specific topic. But for now, what I want to encourage you, if you're a pickleball coach, and especially if you're a pickleball coach who's come over from another racket sport, tennis or something else, is to start to think about what are some pickleball specific things that don't apply in tennis or don't apply in the same way in tennis or whatever other racket sport you're coming from that are just limited to pickleball. And think about those, work on those on your court. Why not send them to me? I'd love to know more about these. You can send them to info@pickleballcoachinginternational.com. Love to know about your pickleball specific ideas. Okay, on that note, welcome to Pickleball Coaches Podcast.
Hey, have you heard of the new Play More app?
No, what is it?
Basically, the Play More app is like a stress-free scheduling app for pickleballers. So I don't know, we've struggled a lot in group text trying to organize play. You'll set it up and somebody will just like the text. And I'm like, does that actually mean you're coming or not?
Yeah, and it's like, you never know how many people you have, like what rating they are. It's kind of annoying.
It can kind of just be a nightmare to try to organize groups because group texts are just not fun. So basically, the Play More app lets you send out invitations. You get an RSVP list. If somebody doesn't show, there's a wait list that will actually like put somebody right into.
No way.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Dang, that's awesome. What's it called?
It's called the Play More app. So you should download it at the App Store, or you can go to getplaymore.com if you want to look at it online.
Welcome back to the Pickleball Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Renneson. Today, we are answering some of your questions. That's what we do here on this show, is that you send in your questions, you send in the examples of challenging things that you're doing on the pickleball court as a coach, and I see if I can help you. So let's see. The first one we got here, we've got this one from Simon, or maybe Simon. And Simon says, oh, this is a tough one. Simon says, recently I taught a group a pickleball lesson, and someone wanted a refund. That's a tough one, Simon. That is a tough one. So you didn't tell me much more than that. So you're teaching a group lesson, maybe it's a clinic, something like that. And let's assume, I don't know, 4, 6, 8 people, maybe more. And you get a message afterwards from someone who says, hey, I would like a refund. I'd like my money back. Now, presumably, they were not happy with the service that you offered, right? That's typically why people ask for refunds. So what do you do? Well, I'm guessing at this point you don't have sort of a refund policy in place. That might have guided you. So that's a tough one. My personal opinion is that I only want people to pay for the stuff that we offer. That includes like our pickleball instructor certification course. I only want them to pay for it if they really like it, if they feel like they're really getting good value for it. And so if someone is going to go out of their way after a lesson to say, hey, I didn't really get what I wanted out of this. I didn't get my money's worth. I think my inclination from like a customer service perspective is to say, hey, I'm really sorry to hear that. How are we going to make it right? And a refund might be one way to do it. But I also realize that, you were relying on that money, or you might have been relying on that money that you got. That person who you're now going to have to refund if you go that route took up a space from someone who might have otherwise joined your class, right, and paid for it. So you're going to be out. That's tough. So yeah, my default would be to say, hey, I'm going to give you your money back. I'm sorry it didn't work out this time. Thanks for letting me know. Thanks for being open and upfront. I would try to make sure I can get the information from the person so I understand what it is that they didn't like. But what else could you do? Maybe you could offer something in kind. Maybe you don't have to give the money back. Maybe you can say, hey, I'm really sorry about that. Was it the wrong group for you? Why don't we give you another spot in another session and we'll do it on the house, make it complimentary, right? Maybe you've got some other product that you might be able to give them. I don't know. Have you put together a little draw package for them. Maybe you sell equipment or something like that. You can give them a little discount. So there are other ways that you could do something in kind. I like the idea that, we call it giving them the pickle. And there's a great YouTube video, you can look it up, called Give Them the Pickle. And it's essentially a customer service video about, hey, you might be taking a little bit of a hit now by giving someone the extra pickle, or in this case, giving them the refund or giving me a discount on something else. But what do you get in return, right? You get a good customer service experience. You get the person feeling like they're being heard, which I think is really important and probably in the long run will benefit you. So yeah, Simon, that's a tough one. I would say, depending on how badly you need the money, either give it back and say, hey, I'd love to learn from this. Can you tell me more, how I didn't meet your expectations? Or if you're not able to give that money back because, I don't know, you spent it, you really needed something, then find another way to give them the pickle to make sure that they feel like you heard what they said and you respect it. All right, our next question comes from Sally, and Sally says, hey, do you have any tips for how I can improve my communication? How can I be a better communicator as a pickleball coach? Okay, this is a really good question, Sally. And I think we can think about communication as sort of having three different components. There's the before the session, there's during the session, and then there's after the session. I think all of them are important. If we're talking about before the session, it depends a little bit on how we're doing this. Are you doing some destination trip, some camp somewhere, how you're going to communicate with them before the camp? That really matters. But maybe it's just your weekly clinic. I think it's really helpful, sort of going the extra mile, to reach out to your people, reach out to your students in advance of the session, even if it's just something like, hey, really looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Or, hey, here's a reminder, we start right at 10 o'clock. Or, hey, we're going to get hitting right away. So anything you need to do to prepare, warm up or whatever, that's your responsibility. Do it beforehand. Or, hey, everyone, the weather's looking a little bit chilly. Make sure you bring a coat or something like that. Something that kind of reminds them that they're coming and also shows that you care, I think is a really great idea. You might also tell them, give them a little bit of a heads up about what it is you're going to work on, right? If there's a particular theme. Hey, just a reminder that this week's session is all about spin. So we're going to be doing lots of spin stuff. So get ready, right? Or something like that. Now, what about the communication during the session itself? Well, this is a very big topic, Sally. How you introduce topics really matters, right? So, once you welcome everyone and you do the meet and greet and you're really setting the tone, right? I guess that's a good place for us to start, is really setting the tone as soon as your people arrive, being friendly and professional and on time. I think it's great. I try to make sure that I have kind of sort of a certain amount of calmness, right? Because especially if people are coming in, they're kind of they're tense right at the start of their session. Maybe they haven't done pickleball clinics before. So a certain amount of calmness, but then once things get going, I kind of want a certain sense of urgency. Hey, we're moving pretty quick here, right? We've got limited time. And that's my personal preference, because I like our sessions to feel like they're pretty quick, right? That there's a lot happening. I think whenever you're introducing something new, whether it's a new drill or a new skill, it's really helpful to include the what and the why and the how. So the what is kind of you're setting the context. Hey, everyone, I noticed when we were playing our little doubles game a minute ago that when we received high balls, we weren't always very good at finishing the point, right? So we're going to do a little activity here, a little drill where we get to work on that, right? That's kind of the what. Now, what about the why? Well, hey, when we play pickleball, the whole reason, or one of the reasons at least, why we come up to the net so often is so we can get these high, juicy balls that we can attack. Right. And we want to be really good at that, because if we get those high juicy balls and we can't attack them, that's like going to work all week. And when they go to give you your paycheck, you say, thanks, I don't want it. You're fine. Right. We want to go get your reward for the work that you've done to get up toward the net. So that's kind of the why. That's the tactical connection. And then there's the how. And the how is really important when we're communicating. And the how is not just you explaining what to do, but you showing them what to do. Show them how to take that high ball and hit it hard. Whatever your technical teaching points are, whether it's, really making sure that the hand and the wrist are involved so you can accelerate quickly, or whatever it might be. Don't just talk about it, also show them. The showing is an important part of the communication. Now, what about after the lesson's over, after your session's done? I think the communication is really important there as well, right? I think it's really important that at the end of the lesson, you thank everyone for coming and for their effort. They could have spent their time and energy and money somewhere else, but they chose to spend it with you. So showing a little bit of gratitude there, I think, is a good idea. And even a follow-up email afterwards, and it could include a summary. I like to include a summary of the lessons that we did, especially in a group setting. But it doesn't even have to. You might just send a thank you email. Hey, thanks for your hard work today. It was really great to see all of you. Can't wait to see you next week. Or, hey, we've got another session coming up next month. Here's the sign-up link. Something like that just sort of follows up with them. Again, thanking them for taking part in what they were taking part in, but also you can sort of set the stage for going forward in the future. All right, our next question comes from Rodrigo, and he says, hey, Mark, what are your thoughts about doing a physical warm-up before the session starts? I never see my players warm up on their own. They just want to get hitting right away. Okay, Rodrigo, great question. I'm going to tell you a quick little story. Back in the olden days when I was a tennis coach, I had a boss, and this boss was not great, but he was the boss. And one day, I was teaching tennis, and I happened to be teaching my group lesson right beside his group lesson. They were different groups. They were working on different topics, but, they're all adults. And for me, when everyone came out there and we got going right away and we were hitting some balls and, they were moving and we had, it was sort of like a focused warm-up, but it was a hitting warm-up, right? They were hitting balls as they were warming up. And I looked next door at my boss, and my boss had all his players put down their tennis rackets, and they started running around the court, like in circles. And as they were going around in circles, they were then waving their arms, right? They were doing some of these. And then they stopped and they were, moving their wrists and they were doing all this stuff. And I noticed as they were doing all this that most of them were looking over at my court. And I'm sure they weren't just looking at me, right? They were looking at my players who were all hitting balls and having a really great time. Most of those players, I think, wished that they were on my court. The moral of this story here, when you're working with adults, look, I wish everyone came sweating. I wish that when they showed up on my court, as soon as we start hitting those dinks or those volleys or those drives, that they were already sweating. They were ready to go. I would love that. Less likely to get injured, more likely to be successful. It's true. But also in my experience with recreational adult players, they're there to play pickleball. They aren't there to do a general physical warm-up. If you're working with kids, it's different because you're sort of setting habits for the future, right? And kids are different. But with adults, I don't think it's a great idea in most cases to do a general physical warm-up on the court with them. I think more often than not, they're going to feel like it's kind of juvenile. They're going to feel like, what are we doing here? I want to be playing pickleball. I didn't sign up for an aerobics class. So my suggestion to you, Rodrigo, is to let your players know that when they get there, you're going to start hitting balls right away. Let them know that it's important to be physically prepared to play, to be warm, to be loose. They're going to be a better performer. They're also more likely to stay uninjured. And so encourage them and even give them tips, right? Maybe you can send them YouTube videos. You can show them, hey, if you don't know what to do as a warm-up, here's a bunch of ideas. But at least from my perspective, forcing adults in a recreational setting to do a general physical warm-up, especially when you don't really know their backgrounds, more often than not, I think it's not going to pan out well, at least in my experience. Is there anything wrong with going out and getting them all to a general? Absolutely not. No, like they're going to, maybe be less likely to get hurt. But I do think there's ways to encourage it without sort of forcing adults to do it in a way that might make them feel like they're kids. All right, our final question of the day comes from Lauren. And Lauren says, hey, Mark, can you tell me different ways I can make my drills easier or harder for my players? How do I make it simple to up or decrease the challenge while still keeping the drills the same? Okay, great question, Lauren. There are a few different ways. We talk about this a lot in the PCI Level 2 Instructor Certification Program, but I will tell you about it here today. There's a few different ways you can increase or decrease challenge. One of the easiest ways is just by changing the size of the target. So let's say it's a depth target, right? You're trying to hit volleys nice and deep toward the baseline. Obviously, a cone or something that is closer to the net, meaning, hey, you've hit anywhere between the cone and the baseline, the bigger that target is, the easier it's going to be. Let's say your players have lots of success. Great. Now you can push the cone back, and now the target becomes a bit smaller. You can push it back even further, and the target becomes even smaller. So the easiest way to change degree of difficulty is just by changing the size of the target. But there's other things you could do as well. You could add movement. So, hey, it's not enough to just hit that volley toward the target. I'm also going to play a ball that you've got to chase. You're going to have to run a step or two, move to your left or right to get that ball to be able to put it in the target. So adding movement is a way to increase or decrease difficulty. You could also change the feed. So, hey, I'm going to send the ball to you. And if I send you a level 1 ball, right, it's going to be easier to put it where you want in the target. And if I send you a level 2 ball, because now it's faster, that's going to be tougher. Or a level 3 ball, it's faster still. Maybe it's got some extra spin on it. So changing the feed that you send the player, so the ball that they're receiving, is another great way to adjust the difficulty. You can also add some sort of consequence or some pressure. Hey, guess what? If you don't hit the target, then there's going to be some sort of consequence. You got to do a push-up or run a lap or something like that. So by adding pressure, that's another way. So these are kind of your main ways to increase or decrease challenge. Play around with the size of the target. Change the feed that you might send the player. Make it faster or slower. Make it, spinnier or less spinny. Make them move more or make them move less. And then finally add some pressure, one way or the other, some sort of consequence. Or maybe it's a reward. Maybe if they hit the target 5 times in a row, then you, coach, you have to do the push-up. Good luck with it. All right, that's going to do it for this episode of Pickleball Coaches Podcast. I'd love to know, what do you think about the show? Why not send me email? info@pickleballcoachinginternational.com is a good way to do it. Don't forget, we've got instructor certification courses, and as well as doing them online, that's kind of been our bread and butter all along. It's online pickleball instructor certification courses at pcipickleball.com. We are also doing more and more in-person, live in real life, on the court pickleball instructor certification courses too. You can get all the information you need over at pcipickleball.com. That's pcipickleball.com. Until next time, I'm Mark Renneson. Thanks for being here.